McKenzie Dern has taken a bit of a lashing lately that surprised me. I was at the Garden over the weekend. I saw the fight. I didn't think it was as awful as so many other people did. I mean, I was actually surprised how many people, not that thought she'd won and that she got upset. McKenzie Dern was almost a 3-1 favorite when that fight went off. Are you guys aware of that? It was like a 275. I'm rounding a little bit. Does that surprise you? I mean, that seemed a little high for such an aggressive and strong opponent. Not to mention, we were made well aware of some emotional things that was going on with McKenzie. I mean, look, I'll give you an example. McKenzie told any interview that she could that she was going through a divorce and how much that it took out of her. That's relevant. And you might not really be able to weigh that and factor it in. We've all had our heart broken somewhere along the way. You might consider at least a little bit. And then her cornermen are licensed and they're documented. And she was not with Coach Jason Perillo. That's a change. So you would also have something to consider with that. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't, but it would affect it. In this case, it didn't. Almost a 3-1. I'm rounding up. I thought that was a surprise. And she goes out, she finds herself in a hard fight, gets caught, goes down. Fine. Well, not so fast. That's not really the way the story was reported. A number of people have talked about how bad she looked. Not a compliment to the opponent. And not a... Right, and there's a difference. We had 11 fights. We had 11 people get beat. It's okay. You have a 50% chance of losing every time you walk in there. This was different. It wasn't that she underperformed. It was just how bad she looked. I mean, I just kept seeing this. I don't know that I can agree with it. It wasn't my assessment. McKenzie was forced to play a seemingly dangerous game, and she's played it before, which is, I am a world champion on the ground. I'm a second generation. My father is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu legend. And in this contest, I'm going to have to go out and strike for probably the better part of 15 minutes. And it's not the first time she's found herself in that spot. So it's not the first time that she's lost some of those positions and had to turn to something else. Not the last time she lost a fight. It's not the only time that she's ever been upset. None of that is the narrative I'm speaking to you from. I'm speaking to you from my surprise, specifically how bad people thought her performance was. I didn't see that. And a lot of it had to do, and again, she ends up in a stand-up fight, and she wasn't working with Coach Jason Perillo, and a lot of this was mentioned. And I'm kind of scratching my head on that going, that's not the way this works. I don't know what a camp is. That's a boxing term. Like, we in MMA adopted this from boxing, much like being in the corner and jumping rope. We don't do that. Jiu-jitsu and wrestling, we don't do that. But boxers did it, so now we stand in the corner and we jump rope. But it's very similar with the vernacular of a training camp. That is a term that we stole. It went for years and years and years. Nobody ever said camp. And all of a sudden it started. And I'm only bringing to you that if you leave somebody for a camp, you don't forget how to fight. Or if they have a specialty, which in Coach Perillo, he's this great boxing guy, you don't forget your hands and your movement, your head movement, how to slip. That just isn't the case. But a lot of people came to that opinion that she had lost that she should have been with Perillo, that she should return to Perillo. None of this is a commentary on her not working with Coach Perillo. None of it at all is a commentary. I'm attempting to prove a point that for people that are using that, for to send McKenzie back to Coach Perillo for a couple of months, it's not as though those things come back. Right? There's something else at play here. And McKenzie is so doggone tough. I have had a number of problems with decisions she has made in her career. But that's what I do. I sit back and I judge everybody. And I have the benefit of hindsight, and I come back with you should have done this, right? I'm no different than any other Monday morning quarterback that wants to do that. She has been a little bit surprising for me in that, even when she got into MMA in the first place. We had a grappling match for her to do, and it was opposite Miesha Tate. McKenzie wanted to get into MMA, though, and she turned the grappling match down because she was so focused on MMA. I'm kind of looking around, I'm going, McKenzie, Miesha's the biggest name in women's MMA, and she's willing to come to your sport of grappling. If you want into MMA, there is nothing better you could do than to come and do this match with Miesha. But this is Chael. I'm literally telling you, I'm looking at it and thinking that. They don't see McKenzie in these fights. And It's a really interesting thing with jiu-jitsu, and I say this as a practitioner. I say this as I love it. I say this as a black belt. It took me 20 years under Fabiano Schern. I mean, I really love the sport, but I've also earned the right to speak about it. And in 1993, when they set that octagon up for the first time in Mobile, Alabama, and that young man at 178 pounds named Hoist Gracie walked out with a family train and started winning fights, wow, that was an incredible thing, and we saw that as a complete art, right? A little bit later, closer to the year 2000, as a matter of fact, but we start to see that we need other things, and we start to develop a term called mixed martial arts, where you're combining them all and you're doing it under one roof. And I'm just sharing for you, once we were shown that in 2000s, there is still a big belief of the 1993 that there was a complete art that you could go in and do it. And the one thing about jiu-jitsu is you will learn to a fascinating degree, ins and out and intricacies, and it's just wonderful if you're into that kind of thing, right? It's the kind of thing you're going to like if you like that kind of thing, and I happen to, but it's one position. And it just creates for a fantastic philosophy. I mean, Bruce Lee couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag, but Bruce Lee is in the UFC video game, and he's revered by many because he had an idea and he turned out to be right. Even though he couldn't do it himself, he didn't have the work ethic, he didn't have the courage, the sport wasn't around. There's a lot of reasons that Bruce didn't actually go whip anybody's ass. But he talked about it, and he talked about if he needed to, what he would do, and he talked about if you want to be able to whip somebody's ass, here's what you should do, and time went on, and Bruce was right. He was right. And I go to Bruce not to give him a backhanded compliment here. I go to him to speak about how important the philosophy of this sport is. The sport of martial arts is largely about philosophy. And you take those philosophies and then you test them. That's largely what we're doing here today, and it's very compelling. So you must understand this about jiu-jitsu. Like, I remember the first time that I heard a guy trying to sell me on the idea of jiu-jitsu. And he was using this term. I'd never heard the term. I didn't even know why he kept saying it. And the term was to finish somebody. He was telling me, I got these things and I can finish somebody. I didn't even know what it meant. Why do I want to finish somebody? What do I care if it gets finished? What difference does it make? I mean, at some point, the referee's going to stop it. The horn's going to go off. What difference does it make? I beat him within the regulation, or I go to regulation and I beat him. Now, I don't share with you that I have those same philosophies to this day. I'm sharing with you when I first heard the term. I personally didn't understand it. I already have a way to beat him, which is to control him. I'm a wrestler. You can see where that would make sense. But if I'm doing what it is I plan to do, I'm going to win when time runs out. So why, to get the same result, which is to win, do I need to go and dedicate my life to a practice so I'm going to get the same result, but I'm going to do it quicker? I don't understand. I'm just sharing for you. This was one of those things, but it's something that you really need to think about. There's only 4 positions in MMA. When you're watching or you're a practitioner and you're inside of that cage, there's 4 positions. Do you know what they are? I don't say it to condescend to you, but it would be important that you identify what those 4 are. And if you're learning anything outside of those 4, you're wasting your time. And as much as I love jiu-jitsu, I must admit for you got this position with some wonderful intricacies. But it's really hard to get to those positions, and it requires other skills. And then on top of how difficult wrestling is, on top of that, what if it's nullified? Now you got to go to yet another plan, right? You've got to go. It's just one of those things. That's what makes the sport. So it's very interesting when I hear people say that McKenzie Dern should have been striking more. It's just an interesting concept to me. Or that McKenzie Dern used to strike better and she lost it because of changing of camps, which consists of anywhere from 8 to 11 weeks. It just seems like if you're looking for an analysis and you're looking to learn and you're looking to expand upon the philosophies, we'll go all the way back to Bruce Lee. As good as he was not about fighting, as good as he was not, let's go all the way back and include him in this conversation and talk about philosophies. Why was it you would come to that conclusion? And it seems as though we're finding out we're wasting time. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out, I've been on a lot of phone calls and a lot of face-to-face conversations trying to find out exactly what happened with Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury. How can a guy in Tyson Fury who's done this nonstop rinse and repeat says he was a little kid? It's the second time it's happened. Conor McGregor also, not very much time, versus a guy who's done it as a little kid. How can it be so competitive? And what we're finding out is we're wasting a lot of time. We're on the road and we're running and we think that's great stuff, or we're shadow boxing in front of a mirror and we think that's great stuff, or we're jumping rope or hitting a double in bag, or we're doing the speed, or we're working on the mitts. Like, that's not ultimately what you're doing. That's not ultimately what a referee's looking for. That's not ultimately what a judge is going to weigh in for. It doesn't matter how good you are at jumping rope. It frankly doesn't matter how far you can run in comparison to your opponent. Now, I'll never stop doing those things, and I'm a coach myself, and I will continue to have my athletes doing those. Like, I'm not turning on the idea. What I'm sharing for you is we have a philosophy that apparently isn't quite as refined as we thought. And we bring somebody else in that would on appearance have done it much less time, but did they really? I mean, if I have 2 hours in my day, and of that 2 hours, I spend 15 minutes doing what we're actually going to do in the competition, what the judges are actually looking for, what I actually must be better than my opponent. I have 2 hours in a day, but only 15 minutes I spend on what I actually need to be better than my opponent at. It gets to be a very interesting concept. And where does McKenzie go from here? And just how bad did she look? And was it a physical distraction or a mental distraction? Before you start to unpack that, how about some of the compliments? How about walking in Madison Square Garden? How about dealing with the divorce, which is not easy? How about having to move states? How about being without her coach? We're all acting like it was her idea. Maybe it wasn't. We don't know what happened there. In all fairness, I could not have gone on without Coach Clayton Hires. I couldn't even imagine having to do that. She had to do all of these things, and we don't know why. We've just decided that we know why. And we don't know why there was that performance. We've just decided that we've known why. And we don't know why she didn't take the fight to the ground. We've just decided that we know why. And you also don't know what McKenzie needs to do to get better. You're just decided that you do. And frankly, you're being a little bit rude. Give a person, particularly a top fighter like that, who went out on their shield, give them a little bit of grace.